All right, so had a little rain last night, nothing major, but now that I got the thing set up, it runs really good, drives nice, no more death wobble. But you can, I don't know if you can tell, this thing's got kind of a Carolina squat going on. The front end is 2 inches higher than the back, and I mean it's got decent ground clearance, but it's caused the shocks to get blown. The front shocks are bad because in order to lift this thing, what we did, or what was done, is they just added this spacer between the top of the shock mount and the spring. And what that ended up doing is pushing this, pushed the spring higher, which pushed this down, which overextended the shock rod. So this thing is within an inch of the max of its travel right now. And I noticed that when I jacked it up, because the front tires almost come off the ground immediately, like 2 pumps and they're off the ground. And so every time you go over a bump where this thing has to go down, it overextends and hits the stop, which has knocked the seal out of it. I mean, it's a side-by-side. Maybe you really don't care, but I think with these used pieces that I have, I'm going to pull those off with the spacers and then put these on without the spacers, just to see what it looks like, if it really matters. And if it's acceptable, I may just leave this thing at stock ride height. If nothing else, what I can do is maybe cut this in half, or take it from like 2 inches down to 3/4 of an inch or something like that. Just give it a little bitty lift, but don't overextend the top. Now, this ought to be really entertaining, because this looks like it's slipped down into this channel here. We got a couple of through bolts that compress it and grab onto the shock from the spindle itself. And obviously it's been out before, so maybe it'll come out, but that's going to be something. That's going to be fun. So we're going to get set up, start pulling this apart, and see what we can come up with. So there's not too much holding this thing in. Nice, the shock's got a hex on it, so you can grab a hold of it with a little wrench while you back this off. So that's good. And then you got these two little bolts down here. One of them has a brake hose holder on it. And so we're going to pop all that off, see what we can do. I've wire brushed this a bit, tried to get that good. And then we're going to try to take the nuts off, try to take the bolts off. So looking at one of my newer ones, or my used ones, it's supposed to be a 3/8 hex up here, but it is utterly boogered up. So, unfortunately, we're going to use ye olde vice grips, because there is nothing left to grab onto. Let's see if this can work. Oh boy, it's going to be one of those. No, that ain't working. So I'm gonna turn this off while I figure this out. Alright, well, I don't like using impact wrenches on that kind of stuff, but it worked. It actually spun it off, so doesn't seem like it damaged much. Gonna try to be a little bit easier to put it back on. So now we're gonna try to get the bottom pieces off. Alright, so it looks like these fasteners are 13s. Oops. But, man, these people like stuff stiff. I gotta get a stand to put under that. Since it's hanging on the brake line now, I don't want to do that. There we go. That's a little better. Okay, it's actually a 1/2 inch. Who knew? Man. Oop. That's good. Shoot yourself in the face with it. Okay then. Ratchet's about junk. That tells me I'm probably going to need a little, potentially need a little spring compressor, because she's, yep, there she goes. Well, she's pulling out anyway, so that's nice. Okay. Yeah, they've boogered that pretty good. Some pretty deep gouges in here from where it was spread apart to get it out the last time. Spring is finally loose. Oh, there she goes. Okay. So that's the perch. And that's the lift kit. Pretty substantial. But it is just, oh wow, it's metal. Full of garbage. It's just a collar that sits on that and pushes the shock up in the holder. So, like I said, I'm not really a fan of that because you know, it pushes the travel of the shock too far up. So we're going to try to install one of these. It seems a little less greasy. After I clean this out, I'm going to put it back to factory height and see what it looks like. Alright, so that's not going to be too bad because it moves free enough where I can bottom the shock out in the holder while it's under load. So I can probably do that, get that installed. Oop, forgot the ring. Yeah, there we go. So now it's got a little bit more purchase than just sitting on the aluminum. So we can crank that down and clamp that in and have it correct. Okay, we got her in. It's not too bad. I pushed all the way down, got these snug back up. Now we're going to attempt to get this back in here. Kind of hold it up. See if we might be able to get. And that's what I get for buying used parts. These threads are kind of boogered up. So since that seems to be a 3/4, I'm going to see if I can figure out what thread that is and chase it. Okay, well, we're back at stock ride height. Not terribly happy with that shock because it was threads up here were really boogered. I ended up having to chase them. It does seem to be half 20 because the nut went right back on. But there's a section of threads that is so bad I ended up having to put a stopper washer in there just to stabilize it. So, doesn't look terrible. I mean, it's in. Spring is good. Now though, what we're going to do is pop the wheel off the other side, put the wheel on this side, and then lower it down and see how low we really are. If I am going to need some of that spacer, if I can get away with this. I'm hoping I can get away with the stock suspension height because it just sat too high in the front. So we're going to try that now. That's not quite right because it's sitting on a jack on the other side. But yeah, I think that's going to work. I think I'm just going to pull the spacers out of those and call it a day. Hopefully. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Clean this up, try to get that off. Break these loose. Pop this out, get rid of this silly thing, and then put a stock one back in, clean it all up, and put it back together. Hopefully that works. Okay, so there it is. Front end looks a little bit more reasonable. It's leveled. We're actually at the factory height in the front. I got a 2-inch lift, and the rear shocks are jacked all the way up in the back. So I think that looks pretty good. Now I know that I've got good travel on the shocks. One thing I did notice when I was putting it all back together is with these tires and the aftermarket Super ATV steering system, the tire was, the sidewall was just barely touching that that rod end on each side. So I ended up putting one little tiny spacer behind the wheels on each stud just to move them out just enough to clear that. And yeah, that's much better. And we've got about equal travel on the way up now as we do in the back. So it takes quite a few pumps of the jack once you hit the frame to get the front tires to come off the ground, rather than like a half a pump and they're off the ground, because that spacer put the shock all the way at the end of its travel. I'm probably going to end up having to replace these shocks at some point, but I got two basically okay ones in there right now. I think I'm going to be calling this kind of done for repairs for the moment. We'll be heading up to Arkansas next week to hunt, and we'll definitely be giving her a workout. I took it for a quick rip last night. The death wobble is gone, the steering wheel is straight, ride's good. Oh, here's something else I forgot to, I didn't make a video while I was making it because I was kind of grumpy at the time. It's been a week. But I took some sheet tin that I had and made a block off plate to try to keep all of the mud out of the fuel tank area. The other side really doesn't need it on this one because there's not a lot there. The battery's there, but that's about it. And it doesn't get that bad because there's no floor. This being a 2014, I don't think, I've not been able to find a kit for this. The 15 and up models, when they refreshed it, they have parts you can buy for, I don't know, a couple $100 to do that. But that cost me, well, I had the tin and I had the paint and I had the little pop pins that I used here and here and here, and these fasteners are existing fasteners that I just reused. So that cost me nothing. So that's better than a couple $100, I guess. And I'm sure it's going to be more than adequate to keep goo and dirt and crap out of that fuel tank area. So it took an hour or so, and it's not pretty because I don't not only am I not a carpenter, I am not a sheet metal guy, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's going to work well. And now, since I had to pop the A-arm off of this one because I gacked up the half shaft, had to pull that all the way out and get everything back together right so it would turn again, I'm going to re-grease these and take it for a quick drive. I have to say, that's probably how they should feel from the factory. That thing just feels tight. Steering is solid. Even with those kind of whooped rod ends, that's not quite as big a deal as those damn bushings were in the front. So hopefully those rod ends come in. They might come in today, and then I'll knock them out, and then I'll have no play in anything. And then I can do a final adjustment on the alignment. I think I want to get it a little closer to straightforward. But no, she feels good. The suspension in the front is a lot better like that, where you're not, when they down travel or it doesn't bang up against the stop. It's a good riding bike right now, so I'm happy with that. It wasn't cheap. That was probably, shit, you know, with the used shocks, $700 maybe, close to $700. worth of parts to go through this full suspension. Now, all right, looking at it in hindsight, probably didn't need to buy all of the lock nuts and the washers and stuff like that. I could have reused those, so that would have saved maybe 50 bucks. But I really do think the factory parts are worth it. We'll see how they last. They feel better. They certainly fit properly. I mean, the aftermarket stuff fits pretty good too, but you know, you never quite know what the material is going to be. And yeah, the factory stuff is expensive, but it's what they intended to be on this thing. And I mean, I like fixing stuff. I like taking stuff apart and working on it, but not the same thing 3 months, 4 months, 5 months after I do it. That's kind of annoying, especially because we really don't use this thing all that much. Anyway, hope you're all having a good day. I'll have some of these parts available that you saw on my Amazon affiliate, especially like the tools and things like that I use to work on this. I really appreciate everybody who uses that. It does help the channel a little bit. So hope you're all doing well, and we'll be hunting next week. So if I don't put up a video before then, happy Thanksgiving.